The penultimate session now. I'd like to welcome to the stage the COO of Hansa Security, I think it's called, Ajay Kelkar, who's going to talk to us about customer intelligence marketing. Welcome, Ajay.
I have the singular opportunity of talking to you before your drink sessions, so I'm really sorry about that. A lot of you are right behind. I've been a backbencher all my life. Do you want to guys come forward? Easier to relate. If at all anyone wants to come forward, welcome. A lot of people at the end. Please, happy to have you guys closer. Just give me a few minutes while I sort out my presentation. What I have to speak about is customer intelligence marketing, and the point is that most corporates talk about customer being number one, and I have covered that in my presentation, but how often do we as companies, how often do we actually have customers number one? How many of us can lay our hand on our heart and say that in the boardrooms, in the companies, the decisions that we take, do we really have the customer out there? It's not so easy. There are business decisions which get taken with enterprise as number one, right? So really, there's no point going out there looking for customer intelligence when you don't bring that perspective and the backdrop of making the customer being the number one, right? So that's the paradigm. And I think the thought that I want to start with really is that, marketing is traditionally a lot about push, right? So a lot of us, all of us who've been in marketing, we've pushed messages to consumers for years and years. And so you're hearing about consumers not liking that. But all of this push is really about the fact that, you aren't going out there and looking to see how you can be more relevant with consumers, right? So can all of you imagine a world where marketing starts to transform from being a push-based activity to almost becoming a service, right? So how would it feel if consumers were to kind of relate to you because of the kind of things that you do with them, because they start to see it as a service, right? And I want to relate an incident while they get my presentation up. How many of you have credit cards? Right? I'm sure more than that. And how many of you get a call from a credit card company when you make a high-value purchase? Right? So my point really is that, when as a bank, you call a customer who's using your credit card at the point of a high-value purchase to say to the customer that, hey, I just want to call you to ensure that it's you is you, right? What starts to happen is that as a marketer, you're actually making a service happen. You're using data, you're using transactional presence, and you're converting the transaction into a customer experience. And the consumer remembers that as an experience where the brand of the bank or the card company becomes stronger for him or her to say that I can use this card more securely, right? So I think the perspective or the paradigm that I want to talk about is really the fact that as consumers start to interact more and more with companies, and today in India, for example, more than 60% of your GDP is coming actually from service companies, retailers, banks, hospitality, travel. So as consumers start to interact more and more with companies, all of us, we leave data behind. We are leaving footprints of data behind. And that data is going back to the companies, which companies can look at. And if you're able to look at the data, start to understand those footprints, and actually find the insight in that, that's what I'm calling customer intelligence. And as you start to do that, you can start to engage with that insight to give, to make events of the kind that I spoke about happen, which is that someone calls in, let's say it's a DTH company, a direct-to-home cable TV company, and you're a subscriber, and you call up the call center for some information, and if basis your data, the call center employee has actually positioned the right product for you, would that not be like a service, right? So I think the perspective that I want you to start to think about is that the whole bargaining power is shifting from marketers to consumers, and therefore marketing as a function needs to start to transform to become far more of a service. So that's, sure, thanks. Sorry, I may have gone through of saying that as you start to look at the data which the consumer is leaving behind, and as you start to say, how do I start to build relationships with this consumer? End of the day, as a company, you want to build profitable relationships. Because unless you start to do that as an enterprise, you aren't making sense. So looking at how you engage with consumers, how do you create a two-way conversation, how do you build profitable conversations, and how do you build those conversations in such a way that consumers benefit at the end of the day, is really the story that I want to talk about. And more, if you really look at the way the market is changing, while brand equity has always been a huge part of how marketeers treat the most important asset in their armory, which is build the brand. I think more and more data equity is transforming that. The credit card example I gave you was of a credit card company using data to bring an experience in a superior way and therefore transforming the brand. So how do companies who are sitting on petabytes of data, huge amounts of data, start to use that data very powerfully to try and transform customer experiences? Tesco has done that in the US. You have examples of possibly e-commerce companies. Once in a while, I see patterns where I'm buying something and I get something which pops up, which says, hey, look, it's more relevant for you. So as that conversation starts to build, more and more companies will find that data equity will actually rival brand equity in the years to come. And like I said, 60% of the GDP and more than that is really the service economy. So the more and more service businesses start to grow, the more and more interactions with consumers start to happen. And that leaves huge amounts of data behind, which you can tap. I'll give an example. Before me and my partner Swami, along with the Hansa Group, started this company about 4 years back. And before that, I was the CMO of HDFC Bank. And one example I want to give to you is, when consumers start interacting, they leave very interesting trails of data. So when people apply for credit cards, a lot of them, after they apply for a credit card, they end up calling the call center to say, my card hasn't come as yet, right? And a lot of the credit card companies lose money because the card has not been activated and used. So when we went back and looked at the data, we found that people who call up the call center asking, where is my card, are the ones far more involved with that card company. And so as a marketer, we don't need to spend money to tell them to activate the card. They activate on their own, right? So I think what's happening is that more and more of this rich data is out there. And out there for you as marketers, for you as agencies, partners to use and build those profitable conversations around. Now, it's not easy to build those conversations. A lot of marketing has traditionally been right-brained, creative, led by more consumer insight, driven out of direct research with consumers. I think that's transforming slowly into a much more left-brained activity where analytics, data, looking at that may start to play a much larger role than, let's say, focus groups or quantitative research. So I think as all of those changes start to happen, the other change that I want to talk about really is that thanks to this more and more service businesses, we have a large number of consumers today sitting on some database or the other. All of us are either in a bank or a travel company, some database we occupy, and which really makes us very, very reachable and very, very targetable. However, from a company's point of view, the challenge is that despite so much of petabytes of data being produced, there's an execution gap. So companies are producing data, consumers are giving this data, but companies are not able to leverage that, monetize that effectively. And some of it is to do with the kind of skills that we have. There are these new professions like data scientists, which are coming up now, but not easy to bring those skills in to actually get that kind of knowledge, value, and experience to really monetize data. So some of it is to do with that. A lot of it is to do with the fact that how many decisions get taken keeping the customer right up front, right? So, often companies go out there and incentivize new customers more than your existing customers. You go back and buy another credit card, you'll get a better deal than if you were to be an existing customer. So I think that paradigm, as it starts to change, obviously those changes will happen. I spoke about this. I spoke about how data equity can drive brand equity and this particular experience, which makes sense. And I want to quickly touch upon a couple of marketing trends. I know that all of you have been exposed to this through the day. So I just want to quickly go through it. I'll go through it a little fast. So really 4 trends that I want to talk about. One is getting harder and harder to reach consumers thanks to media fragmentation. There were those good old days when Doordarshan could get you, with a Ramayana, Mahabharata kind of a program, maybe a huge percentage of TRPs. That's changing. Like I said, 400 million consumers and more sitting on some database. So consumers are getting more and more addressable. I can reach them. So if I'm on a credit card database, I can be contacted to market to. That changes the paradigm from being a mass marketing paradigm to a one-to-one conversation paradigm. So how does that work? More and more consumer control, like I said, can marketing transform towards being a service. So the more and more of that interactivity is leading to how can marketing transform the way they almost co-produce products, maybe, with consumers. So that aspect is changing. And what that is also doing is that any slip up from a marketing perspective, thanks to social media, gets amplified. So you need to be conscious and obviously work in a way by which you can limit that damage, but more importantly, like I think earlier Kanika's session took you through, how do you leverage that? And I think finally, all of us as consumers leave data behind from different points of view. So how do you integrate that, make that into one place? So I kind of spoke about all of this, so I'll just move on. So really, what does that mean from the perspective of the marketer? How does marketing change because of that? I spoke about the fact that listening to customers is changing. Only pure marketing research may not cut ice. You need to start looking at the data the customer is leaving behind. And what that really does is that what it allows you as either a retail store or a bank or a travel company is to actually start to market when the consumer is ready. So imagine if let's say I have a savings account at a bank, and let's say for a minute that you're Bill Gates, right, and you have an account at the bank as well. And if I get 100,000 rupees in my account, believe me, that's significant, right? If you get 100,000 rupees, it's not so significant. Now, if the bank is able to leverage its data and actually make significant events at a consumer level come out, then imagine how, for me, a call could come in saying that, would you like to buy some insurance or a mutual fund because you have more money than you had before? Obviously, you won't make that call to Bill Gates with 100,000 rupees more coming in, right? So the point really is that can you look at the data and make your conversation relevant, right? So as a marketer, become ready to engage and create more relevant conversations. I think that's the story that's important. And more, we know that this is a decade of gadgets. You have, Sandeep spoke about it earlier about how much information that's leaving behind, right? What it's also doing is that consumers are now displaying pull behavior, right? Which is that you can go back and analyze how a customer navigates your website and actually see which content is pulling the consumer more than other content, right? So pull behavior is very different from push behavior. So I think this is the journey where as marketers, understanding that pull behavior becomes critical. So moving on more towards how do you build this kind of customer intelligence, I'm going to pause for a minute and talk about the fact that how do really people take decisions, right? So all of us in our own life as well, we may start with a lot of intuition, a lot of assumptions. And at the other extreme, we go down and do a lot of analysis and say, okay, that's an analytical decision, right? Now, when you do that, the issue really which comes up is that what's really sexy about the customer intelligence or the analytics? Is it the fact that you get some great insight? Or is it the fact that as a company, you can make a great decision, right? And then more, you start to embed analysis or customer intelligence or analytics closer to the decision point, the more and more will the company start to see benefit. Decision points are what? You walk into a retail store, you buy something on a POS machine, what do you get as an offer? You call up a call center of a direct-to-home company, you get a relevant offer. You go on the website, does something relevant come back to you? So bringing intelligence closer and closer to the point of contact with customer is the name of the game. It's not just about creating insight. Of course, insight is important. Without insight, the big issue without insight is that you do not have stories to tell decision makers within your companies to be able to influence decision making. So insight is very important, don't get me wrong. But insight is not the sexy part of analytics or customer intelligence. It's actually the distance. And when you start to do that, you start to move from how do I improve my decision, and decisions tend to be a range in large number of different things that you could do. And when you talk about decisions, I'm sorry, the chart is very small, but what the y-axis really has, every company is taking a lot of either low volume decisions or high volume decisions. A low volume decision is a merger and acquisition. A high volume decision is a call the consumer makes to you. So how do you leverage these high volume interaction decision points to push intelligence back to the source and allow that decision to create ROI for you? That's the story here. So really, what are your customers saying? What really is the thought here? I don't think any of us likes to be a market segment. We might say segmentation. But do you like to be a market segment? I don't think so, right? So I'm an individual. I want to be treated as an individual. And how can you bring information and decisions back to help me from my customer experience? So more and more, what consumers are saying is, know me, and that's non-negotiable anymore. And if you don't know me, I go, right? And which is when Sanjay spoke about the lapsation and the issues in insurance about people lapsing, and a lot of them lapse because of maybe mis-selling as well, right? So I think the challenge therefore is that as marketeers, to my mind, there is no option but for us to start to listen better. A lot of companies and many businesses have built the data infrastructure across industry. Thanks to the mass scale that in India we are building, you've had to bring in IT and technology of a scale which allows you to build data warehouses and actually store the data. That's a fantastic place to be. But I think the paradigm still is, if you see this chart, I have a consumer and I have a set of offers. Can I go out and offer them, take my offers and give them to a customer? But what if you change the paradigm from taking offers and giving it to a customer to saying, is there a change in behavior? And can I now make a relevant offer connected to that change in behavior? To give you an example, a bank, a banking business is so rich in data. For example, any lady who changes the maiden name because of marriage has to sign a form when she has a savings bank account. But how many banks come back and congratulate a woman for her wedding with a bouquet, right? So you have data out there, which is there for you to build those conversations which are relevant, and there's a change in behavior. Someone has just changed the address. In HDFC Bank, for example, I remember a couple of campaigns, we looked at consumers who changed addresses. And in India, thanks to the economic situation still, people are still upgrading when you change an address. They're not down machines if you're use wherever customers come and touch you. And that's the point where you move your decision making. So that really is the paradigm that I wanted to talk about. And building this kind of customer intelligence marketing, in my mind, is something which over time is becoming non-negotiable. I think the days when you could do a 30-second film and create mass interest for your product, and that's all, are really over. So what does that do really? What it means, Gartner has done this study which says that by 2017, CMOs, marketing heads, will spend more on IT than CIOs will, right? Get that. Marketing guys will spend more on IT than CIOs will. I think it's going to be a revolution around what kind of technology marketers are going to need to build business with consumers, right? So building that core competency is really, really critical. I spoke about this consumer pull channel and how that's changing the way you analyze behavior. So start learning that. That's an important area. Looking at customer behavior changes. Behavior changes are more important than no change, right? Spot them and take action around them. And I think importantly, customer intelligence, analytics, whatever you call it, is not a technical problem. It's not the algorithms that you build. It's a social problem. How do you tell stories with your data to help decision makers take decisions basis that story which the data is telling? It's a social problem. And that's really how, as marketers, we need to go out and leverage it. I saw an interesting study some time back, which I think it was a CMO Council study, which asked a question that which is the function that CMOs engage most with? And any suggestions here? Which is the function in the company, apart from marketing, which CMOs engage most with? Any thoughts, anyone? Is it finance? Is it which function do you think? Any ideas? Yeah? Sales? Yeah? So sales was number one, and finance was the last, right? Now, don't you guys think that paradigm had better change if you start talking about ROI kind of marketing? Your first point of contact will probably have to be the CFO, right? So I think really it's really analytics and customer intelligence is much more simple than it's made out to be. Often it's spoken like the blind man and the elephant, many words for it, but very simply put, it is the belief that you can bring decisions closer to the consumer and more intelligent decisions which give you better ROI. And obviously it doesn't happen overnight, it takes time. This capability needs to be built, teams need to change and transform, and just a quick plug in what we do. So we come in and we as a company, for example, work with clients, and we tend to come in and say, look, don't just do analytics, but do analytics and do all of the CRM pieces around it. If you don't bring all of that glued together in an integrated kind of fashion, you don't get the output, you don't get the results, you don't get ROI. So that's really what I wanted to talk to you about, and I hope a lot of you do a lot of customer intelligence and do it without doing analysis as spirals. Any questions? I think I've gone through like an express train, so we either have a lot of time and no questions, or Any questions or okay, thank you.